Hi, and welcome back to Solitude with Soleil, where I share my thoughts with you in solitude, directly from my mind to the mic. If you're new here, this is a podcast, video cast, whatever you want to call it, where I talk about my experiences, what I've learned, how I'm moving forward in my journey and healing. And in today's topic, I want to talk about a deal breaker for me in dating and something that I have now put on my radar as a huge, complete deal breaker for me. Just a bit of a context. I was not a person who I would say put myself out there in the dating world. And when I did, I was a bit younger. I didn't really establish what I knew now, wasn't at that maturity level, may have moved fast in certain dynamics. But now, as an adult, learning and understanding and maturing and recognizing like the world that we live in and the steps that I need to take in order to protect myself or to spot red flags, sooner. I have now cemented this pattern that I noticed in my, I guess, dating life. I think that it wasn't really that apparent to me because I guess I just wasn't really experienced in the dating world, to be honest. Maybe I would have a friend whom, we ended up liking each other, but in terms of getting on a dating app or getting dressed and going on a couple of dates and getting to know someone, that wasn't something I was like really experienced in. But after a particular situation, I went back to the drawing board in my journal and I started like really going back and analyzing patterns of things that I had heard. And my most, I would say, telling situations and going back to what they all said in the beginning and how their behavior in the end matched up. And the hugest red flag that they all had in common was how crazy their exes were. My ex was crazy. My ex was jealous. My ex was a psycho type of language. And a disclaimer is we can have negative experiences with people. Objectively, you could date someone who would have traits that someone would deem as crazy. But bringing them up on the first date or the second date is completely inappropriate. And there are better ways to describe how the situation with that person ended than to throw a label of them being crazy. Especially, it may sound a bit biased to say, especially when it comes from a man to me, because that's been my experience. There is so much to that story that we don't know. Like, describing someone as crazy really dehumanizes them, it takes away who they are, the human experience you had with them. Not only that, but it discredits them. Calling someone crazy, almost you are telling someone that they aren't mentally well, they aren't stable. So whatever you hear from them, whatever they say, whatever they did, it was because something was wrong with them mentally. You don't aspire any human traits to the person when you water them down to being crazy. And it also shows a lack of insight into your personal responsibility in that dynamic and what you have learned that you could do moving forward in your future dynamics with someone else. Because, truth be told, you're not responsible for that person's behavior. But on some level, things that happened could help you to identify maybe core wounds from yourself, and maybe some things that were a bit like slid under the radar for you, or ways that you can, I guess, move forward in something else. It also gives them an insight of how you'll talk about them. If they called you their ex crazy and bitter and insecure and jealous, that's showing you an insight of how they'll talk about you when your relationship with them has ended. And I think in my future dating sphere, that the moment that a person brings up how crazy their ex was, that I will be like, hey, so I'm sure you may have had a bad experience with her, but this is a deal breaker for me. And I won't really stick around to find out, because now I'm in the space where I'm trusting the patterns of my previous experiences to know that I literally went to my journal and I journaled a guy that I, maybe different guys that I have went out on a date with, and all of them who use the descriptive language of their ex being crazy. The end result was that I ended up finding out why. And there are ways that you can talk about a partner that the relationship ended maybe terribly, that doesn't completely dehumanize them. It also shows the level of healing that they have undertaken from the situation. Because describing your ex as crazy and going on a vitriol of how terrible they were to you, to the person that you're interested in seeing, it indicates some level of resentment still there, some bitterness and some anger, which unfortunately they can take out on you in the future dynamic. You end up, can be, your actions can be unfairly like matched to that person. You end up having to pay for what another person did, and it doesn't give you a fair chance to show who you are in the dynamic. You deserve a fair opportunity to sit with someone and for them to get to know you without frequent mention of a previous partner. No one wants to hear that. um, there are certainly ways that you can describe the ending of a relationship with someone that doesn't completely strip away their humanity. Like, well, we had communication differences. There were some unaddressed, I guess, wounds from both of us that made certain things in the relationship clash. But what I've learned from this is that when we haven't addressed like our wounds, when we come in a relationship with someone, we can end up bleeding over on them. Like it shows some level of maturity in the person as well, where they are able to say, this is what happened, and they're able to speak about their ex-partner with some level of humanity, because at the end of the day they are humans. But in a case where really their ex-partner was really like terrible, it's still not appropriate for you to bring up on the date with someone, because it completely shifts the, I don't want to say attention, but it completely shifts the mood from you guys getting to know about each other to talking about another person, and inadvertently that places you in the role of an unpaid therapist. You're now doing emotional labor to start to encourage them and build them, and that's not what you want. You want to start the relationship on a clean slate where you both are getting to know each other. So, my ex was crazy is something that is an automatic deal breaker and an automatic red flag. I think you can describe that the relationship ended, that you both weren't on, different wavelengths, and maybe the relationship taught you how to spot red flags sooner, how to walk away when something isn't working for you. It shows some level of growth and personal responsibility, even if you aren't taking responsibility for the person's action toward you. It shows some level of maturity and humanity. And in a dynamic that I had, the same way how the ex was, described as insecure and jealous, in the end, I was described as the same. She was always jealous. She was always going through my phone. She was this, she was that, she was that. And again, it's a clear insight of where you will be toward the end of the relationship with them. And it's just tacky to me. It's kind of, it kind of gives me the ick, I would say. I get the ick when I hear someone talk about their ex like really terribly, because I almost automatically know that I am next. For me personally, I could say, I mean, I'm on the first date, it's not appropriate. And maybe later down in the dynamic, I could mention, he was manipulative. He had a lot of manipulative tendencies. It made me feel like I was always doubting my reality and my perception of events that happened. I felt really blamed. Um, are ways that further down, once you've like built mutual trust with the person, that you can, you know, talk about the situation. But automatically a guy telling you that his ex was crazy is is a deal breaker for me and a red flag, because you were with that person for an amount of time, and there is some humanity in that person that you are stripping away by watering them down to being crazy. And especially be observant of the community around them. How the community talks about the ex partner as well will be how you will be talked about. If the community, you've observed the community of a guy is still going on about their ex 2 years down the line, a year down the line, and they have nothing positive to say about her, they gossip about her, they smear her, they speak terribly of her, they compare you to her, that is the same way that you will be treated in the end. And it shows a level of toxicity in that community. It also shows them kind of ascribing this God complex to the person who was hurt, as if they had no part at all, zero role to play in the dynamic, and then you end up finding out. Like a particular experience with me, it was such a learning experience for me, because it disappointed me a lot, because I was keen on the red flags, especially with them and the community. But it was set up so much that you felt so much guilt. And there were so many moving parts. If you ever decided to like leave that person, you would bear the weight and the responsibility of their mental health, of their livelihood. You were afraid that if you left them, that they would tell someone that they are suicidal because of you, and you, that's a role and a responsibility that no one wants to bear. But in a community where a person or a group of people sit down and they are going on this vitriol about the ex-partner, about how she was crazy, she this to him, she that to him, she this, she that, she that, she was bad, she was, and they take it a step further to tell you how much better you better you are than that person, it shows a lack of maturity in that community, because mature individuals will just see you, it's nice to meet you, and accept you as the new person's partner and allow you to show up in that space as yourself. It also shows like a toxic culture, and in some way it puts this pressure on you to, it's kind of like this social investment where you want to stick with the person even when they're harming you, even when they're hurting you, because your social standing in that community is solely dependent on how well you treat that person, regardless of if they're hurting you, regardless of if they're toxic, regardless of if they're manipulative, regardless of if they are hurting you, that you don't even want to say anything back to them. You don't even want to hurt them in that way. And it's just not the greatest situation to be in, where you are literally just being compared to another person. And I don't thrive in being put up against another person, like another person being put down to exalt me. So I remember in the last dynamic, like, they were like, "Oh, you're so much better than her. She's so much prettier than what's her face." Like those were the comments, and it was completely like immature. I will not sit down and glorify being told I'm so much prettier than your ex-girlfriend, I'm so much better than her, because that's so superficial and that's so dehumanizing to the previous person, and it shows where I will be in the next few weeks, in the next few months. Should I leave or should you move on? Like the next ex, I'm going to be torn apart and suffer reputational damage for you. It also shows like this, the community, it shows like this cult like behavior where everyone is assigning so much power to a person, and the person who dare hurt them or dare embarrass them is ostracized. And it doesn't show independent thinking, it just shows a lot of groupthink, and it's not a community that you want to be in like long term at all. So I really pay attention to just how they talk about their previous relationship and their previous partners, and just talking about them in a negative light, like they were crazy, they were this, they were that, is an automatic red flag and a deal breaker for me. But if you have any experiences with this and you can relate to what I'm sharing, feel free to drop some comments down below. We can talk about it, see if we have any similar experiences. I know that when I journal about this and I did some pattern recognition, that I realized like, okay, in the pattern of my dating, whenever I've heard like my ex was crazy off the rip, I ended up being the one dragged through the mud. And that's also an example of taking personal responsibility, because personal responsibility doesn't mean I beat myself down and tell myself it's my fault. Personal responsibility can look like I'm not responsible for what they chose to do. They tricked me, they manipulated me, they deceived me. However, should I encounter something like this in the future with someone else, I am now more equipped. I am now more alert. I now have more tools to recognize certain gameplays that are put in front of me, and I can know better how to navigate that situation. So, did I have a pattern of hearing a guy say their ex was crazy and it just didn't ring alarm bells to me? Because I just really didn't know better. And I just really thought like people could be crazy. And it wasn't until the most damning situation that I recognized like this is literally not okay. Now what it tells me is, what do I do moving forward? Should I go on a date with a guy and they take the opportunity to start bashing their ex and going off for 10 minutes on their ex? What do I do now in that situation? I politely excuse myself. I would have had, my money, maybe I put a tip down on the table, I cover my tab. I have a way to get back home. I call myself a taxi. I have extra cash on me. I have data. I have service. And I leave that situation and I block them everywhere. I block them everywhere. I don't owe them a response. And I just move forward in my life because now I have the pattern recognition to know that a healthy date is not surrounded by bashing their ex. It shows a lack of maturity. It shows a lack of personal responsibility. It's almost foreshadowing how you will be described in the end. And it's just not cute for the first date. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And see you in the next one. Bye.